Throughout the 1940s and 50s, small clues began to emerge that hinted at a previously unknown ancient culture waiting to be found. Archaeologists throughout Peru began excavations around Lima that looked to turn the archaeological world on its head. These digs, led by archaeologists such as Rosa Fang, Rafael Latco Hoyle, and Augusto Cardich, hinted at a pre-agricultural society that they believed spanned throughout the northern coast and central highlands of the province of Lima. The truth was much more exciting. Archaeological evidence had thus far dated this culture to have existed between 11,000 BCE and 7,000 BCE. But that is about all we knew about them. Edward Lanning, an American archaeologist from New York, set out to conduct an archaeological survey of the Ancon area of the central coast of Peru, hoping to shed some light on these mysterious people. In order to undertake this extensive survey, Lanning sought out the Fulbright Commission and the Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos to sponsor the project. Over the next 10 years, Lanning uncovered over 50 campsites, quarries, and workshops that made up what later became attributed to the Paiján culture. Welcome back to the History of Peru YouTube channel. Today we will discuss the Paiján culture, the hunter-gatherers of Peru. The Paiján culture is believed to have spanned from the Lambayeque Valley in northern Peru to the Ica Valley in the south, covering over 1,000 kilometers of the Peruvian coast. This area is within the arid desert of Peru, characterized by hot weather and scarce rain. So, how was this culture able to survive in this climate? Well, the majority of the sites found by Lanning were in now extinct lomas plantations. Lomas is the modern name for a diverse group of plants that grow in the deserts of Peru. These plants are able to survive off dew from the ocean fog in the area. In the present day, these plants are only found 300 meters above sea level. They are usually clumped together in small batches, although some larger ones have been found, though rare. This was not always the case. At the time that the Paiján culture existed, these plants grew abundantly and were found over a large area along the coast. And during the time of the Paiján, these plants were able to survive as low as 75 meters above sea level. Throughout the 50 sites discovered by Lanning and his team, the roots of these plants, which had not decomposed due to the climate of the Peruvian desert, were found in the arid earth. Additionally, grinding tools and millstones were common in these sites, and the plant seeds were found in refuse deposits. These plant remains also helped archaeologists determine the rotation schedule for these nomadic people. Lomas bloom during the winter fog that covers the desert between May and November. During the summers in Peru, these lomas plantations would be uninhabitable, and the roots and seeds would dry up. Based on this analysis of the plants and what was found at these sites, Lanning and his team determined that these sites were thus winter sites. In addition to the diet of the lomas plant, the Paiján people took advantage of their proximity to the ocean. The refuse deposits that I mentioned earlier also contain remnants of both seashells and fish bones. These sites, situated between a third of a mile all the way up to 4 miles from the shoreline, contained clear evidence of a diet that relied on both plants and seafood, although this would depend on the location of the site studied. Naturally, the degree to which the Paiján relied on seafood depended on their distance from the ocean. The sites that were further away from the ocean saw seafood account for only 10% of their diet. This is in stark contrast to those that lived near the shores, for whom seafood accounted for about 90% of their diet. Among later Paiján sites, mussel shells were abundantly found and were likely the most common source of protein for the Paiján. So, what can we learn from the fish bones discovered and the refuse deposits? Well, the type of fish bones found suggests that the Paiján fished in shallow waters near the shore or in estuarine environments. One researcher has suggested that based on the size of fish that were caught, it is possible that the Paiján had to rely on some sort of fishing net to bring in the catch. This conclusion has not been accepted by most researchers and must be further studied before we make any definite conclusion. But, if this were proven to be true, this would be indicative of the Paiján being a more advanced civilization than we initially believed. Now, aside from seafood, archaeologists have also found evidence that the Paiján hunted small game, such as fox, lizards, and vizcacha, which is a rabbit-like rodent. Lastly, gourds and sedges, or grass-like plants, were also found in these refuse deposits. Now, it should be noted that these were not found in the same areas as the lomas, as lomas are not native to the area and thrive in different ecosystems. This would suggest that the Paiján would gather fruit and vegetables spanning a wide area and bring them back to their sites to be processed. Given all this information, some initial conclusions can be made about the Paiján. It seems that the Paiján would establish their settlements near lomas plantations. Once built, they would send out scavenging parties, covering a wide area, to hunt for small animals, whether fish or mammals. Other scavenging parties would search for patches in which fruits or vegetables were growing. The level of dependency on either one of these forms of nutrition was determined by the settlement's proximity to the ocean. If you're anything like me, this reminds me of my early game strategy for Age of Empires 2. Seems like humans have always known how to thrive in whatever environment they are placed in, whether digital or in real life. One of the constants that the researchers noted was the fact that the people who occupied these sites did not have to go far in order to find the materials for their stone tools. Due to this, one of the most prevalent artifacts we have of the Paiján people are their stone tools. Evidence at these sites suggests that these tools were locally available, with a popular material being metamorphic rocks. The most exclusive stone was a fine-grained greenstone that had a tendency to hinge fracture. This stone was used almost exclusively for percussion-flaked artifacts. Greenstone was found throughout the hills that Lanning named Cerro Crucent. Another type of rock that was commonly found, dubbed by Lanning as blackstone, was the most popular to use as projectile points at the early sites. At the Luz complex, which is a group of sites that sits near the Ancon-Chillon watershed, Lanning and his team found projectile points and other related hunting implements. The most distinct of these stone tools were ones that looked like arrowheads or axes, triangular stone points or rectangular stone heads, which ranged in size, with the largest among them being about 5 inches. These stones seem to have never been used to hunt or scan animals, although they were found attached to wooden handles. After his initial survey, Lanning published his paper and argued that the scarcity of artifacts throughout the many sites pointed to a pattern of single-use campsites. Based on the artifacts that were left, it was argued that the Paiján would rotate between different locations throughout Ancon every winter, before taking up residence on a different hill during the summer. Based on the later site's abundance of grinding tools, as well as seeds, researchers have argued that the Paiján people grew to rely more on gathering seeds as opposed to hunting. The reason for this change was not explicitly stated by Lanning, but we can assume that this likely signaled a turn to more permanent settlements as opposed to temporary ones. One reason for the higher reliance on the lomas plant by the Paiján could be due to the changing climate of the Pacific Ocean. As the lomas receded further up the mountains, the Paiján people followed their food supply and retreated along with it. As a result of the growing separation from the coast, the Paiján could no longer justify traveling a long distance to the fish. In 1975, French archaeologist Claude Chauchat discovered the remains of a young girl and a young adult woman. Based on the radiocarbon dating, these two individuals are believed to have been alive around 8000 BCE. Now, I have not seen further analysis on this date, but if this is true, that would make these remains the oldest human remains found in Peru. Further research has continued on these sites, and many researchers tend to agree with Lanning's conclusions. That being said, we do not know what happened to the Paiján people. We do not know if the remnants of the Paiján culture was integrated into subsequent cultures, or if they were simply forgotten. One thing is for certain: they have made their mark in history, and even thousands of years later, we keep learning more about them. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a bit more about the history of Peru. If you wish to learn more about the early settlement of modern-day humans in Peru, click on this video to keep on learning. If you are interested in continuing on this journey with me, please subscribe to the channel. I will be posting every 3 weeks, so make sure you ring that bell to be notified of new videos. Thank you so much for staying to the end. Okay, bye.